is about to bring you into a good land. Make sure you don't forget God, your God.
Hello, welcome back to Teaching Through the Bible. So we're finally on to the first commandment of the 10 Commandments. So last time I talked about what we call the 10 Commandments. It's actually the 10 words. It doesn't have to be all 10 of them commandments. And we see actually that the first one is not a commandment. The first one, I am Yahweh your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery. So that's chapter 5, verse 6. That's the beginning of the 10 words, and that is the first word. Now, the remaining 9 words are all commandments. And so this one that we're going to talk about today, this is the second word. It's the first commandment. And each of these commandments is going to be expounded throughout the rest of Deuteronomy. So we'll be looking at stuff from the next half dozen chapters, like chapters 6 through 12, and how those bring out more of the details, more than just the narrow meaning of what we see right here in verses 7 through 10 of chapter 5, that actual command, that actual word, but there's more to it than that, and that's kind of the bullet point like we talked about last time. But let's read that bullet point. Let's start with the explicit command, and then we'll go over what else is entailed in that. So, chapter 5, starting in verse 7. You shall have no other gods before me. You shall not make for yourself a carved image, or any likeness of anything that is in heaven above, or that is on the earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth. You shall not bow down to them, or serve them, for I, Yahweh your God, am a jealous God, visiting the iniquity of the fathers on the children to the 3rd and 4th generation of those who hate me, but showing steadfast love to thousands of those who love me and keep my commandments. So that is the first command we get in the, quote, 10 Commandments. That's the first command. It's the second word. So, what does this mean? Now, obviously, there's several chapters here as we continue to read through this. Chapter 6, 7, 8, 9, all the way up through 12. It kind of gives you more in-depth explanation of this, of what does this all mean, because it means more than just the narrow, hey, just don't make an idol. That's certainly part of it. But let's start chapter 6, verse 4. That's where we kind of get the beginning of the bulk of what Deuteronomy shows to kind of expound this command. Hear, O Israel, Yahweh our God, Yahweh is one. And this is a super important verse. It's actually got its own name. It's called the Shema, which is because the word Shema means, that's the first word in Hebrew, hear. Hear, O Israel, Yahweh our God, Yahweh is one. So that right there is very pivotal in expounding that there's just one God. And then we move on to verse 5. You shall love Yahweh your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your might. And actually in the Hebrew, it's not the word might, it's the word very, with all your very, basically everything. That's what it's trying to get across there. With everything you've got. Very much, so much. Makes me think of Psalm 119. If you've ever read that psalm, longest chapter in the Bible, like 176 verses, something like that. And it's all about loving God's word, loving his law. And honestly, I read it the other day, and I gotta be honest, I do not love God's law that much. The way that the psalmist talks about it, I read that and I'm like, that is not how I feel about it. It should be, but it's not. I think any person being honest reading that's going to say the same thing. I don't love God's law that much. We all should, but we don't. We don't measure up. But we should love it that much because it's his word. It's who he is. It describes him, and we should love him that much. But, again, we don't. That's why we need Jesus. because he does. And so here we have this that's telling us we got to love God so much. We got to love everything about him, including his laws. We have to be focused on him. And when we look at each of these commands, we're going to see actually there's kind of two sides of the same coin. If it says don't do something, there's an implication of do something else. If it says do something, there's an implication don't do something else. And we see that in the New Testament, talking about stealing. Don't steal. Well, Paul says don't steal, make an honest living so that you can provide for others. Right? So it's don't do this, you do need to do that. It's both sides of this same coin. And so here we actually see the positive. So the negative, don't make idols, don't worship other gods. On the positive side, what should you be doing? Well, let's keep going. And these are the words that I command you today shall be on your heart. So again, I've already pointed this out, but the New Testament is kind of categorized a lot of times as that's where it's internal, and the Old Testament is more external stuff. No, it's internal here too. You shall teach them diligently to your children, and shall talk of them when you sit in your house, and when you walk by the way, and when you lie down, and when you rise. You shall bind them as a sign on your hand, and they shall be as frontlets between your eyes. You shall write them on the doorpost of your house and on your gates. So, basically, it's just saying all the time. This should be part of your everyday life. This is not something that you do once a week when you go to a corporate worship. This is all the time. And teaching them to your children. There's one way that we can apply this, right? It's not just don't make an idol. It's positively, hey, talk about God, who he is, what he's done to your kids. And you may say, well, wait a second. Write them on the doorposts of my house and on my gates. Well, you probably don't have gates in some situations. So you have to go get a gate in order to be able to follow this. No, this is not the command itself from the Ten Commandments, right? This is expounding that to the Israelites. So here, some of these are really easy to have a one-to-one as far as how we understand them. Hey, it says, teach my kids. All right, I can still do that in my context today. If you don't have a gate, you're in a different context. This is telling the Israelites who, when they get into the promised land, here's how they're supposed to be living, how they're supposed to be living out these commands. So maybe you don't have a gate, but the idea is the same, that you should have this all around you. And a lot of people today, maybe they have on their doormat, maybe they have a sign like hanging up over next to their front door. A lot of times people will have that, at least where I grew up in the South, they did, and I kind of thought that was a little cheesy, but then I see this, oh, well, that seems to fit with what Moses is telling him to do, actually. So the idea here that we should take from it is that we need to have this be part of our everyday life. But it's not just the positive side. It's not just here's what you do. It's here's what you don't do, right? So what you don't do. Well, don't make idols. Don't worship false gods. All that kind of stuff. There's a heavy emphasis on when you get to the land and you're blessed and you got all that you could want, you're wealthy, don't turn away from God and go to other gods. Don't do that. This is reiterated over and over again. You're going to be tempted to turn to other gods. Don't do that. And that's kind of an emphasis for these next several chapters. And in fact, there's one part here that talks about not intermarrying with the people of the land. And some people may look at this as God just being spoil sport or something, or he just doesn't want us to have fun. But it does say God does this all for our good, and even tells us, well, why is it that you can't marry someone from the land? It's because they will turn you away from the true God to their false gods that they worship. And so it's really important to notice that reasoning that is spelled out right here. because a lot of people will look at a passage like this and they'll think this has something to do with ethnicity. Oh, well, it's because they're not Israelites as far as, their blood relation, things like that. That's not it at all. It has nothing to do with an ethnic sort of reasoning. That's not the reason it gives. It gives a different reason. It's a spiritual reason. And we can actually not only see it because of this reasoning right here, but when we see later on in the Bible, we go look at the book of Joshua. When they go destroy Jericho, they actually let this one woman and her whole family, even though she's the only one that has a belief, it seems, her whole family gets included because God works in families. But they're all brought in to the nation of Israel because she's rejected her gods from her country and she is going with Yahweh. And she actually ends up being one of the ancestors of Jesus. And then later on, book of Ruth. Ruth is seen in a very positive light. And guess what? She's a Moabite. Not supposed to marry the Moabites. But in this case, she rejected her gods from the Moabites and she chose to follow Yahweh. And that made it okay. The Bible looks positively on that. So it's not about the ethnicity. It's about the spiritual situation. So it's saying, don't marry the people from here specifically because of their gods. So if you have these exceptions where they turn from their gods, they're going to follow Yahweh, that is different. And we see here, there's also this temptation to not only have idols out there, but idols within. Hey, I'm so great. Look at me. I'm so righteous. And it says here in these next few chapters that when you go in that land and when you defeat those people, when push them out and you have the land, don't think it's because you're so great, because they're not. In fact, we talked about this one of the last videos in the book of Numbers, but they're not great, they're awful, and the only difference between them really and the Canaanites that they're going to kick out of the land is the fact that they have a mediator. They have Moses, and Moses points this out, brings up the golden calf incident, which, by the way, as we talked about back in Exodus, was them worshiping the true God, Yahweh, but in the wrong way. You can't worship God any way you want. You can't do it the way you feel like. It's not about you. It's about worshiping Him. And He says, no images, not even images of Him. And yet, here they are, making a golden calf, and Moses has to intercede for them, be that in-between, for them to not be destroyed by Yahweh as well. So that's the difference. The difference isn't that they're righteous. It's that they have a mediator, which of course points us forward to Jesus, because the only reason that any of us are able to go live with God for eternity is because we have a mediator, Jesus, who is the one who does really what Moses couldn't even do, because with Moses, it was on a much smaller scale. For Jesus, this is an eternal spiritual thing. And so we see that this is not about us. This is about God, focused on Him. So we can really kind of sum all this up, chapters 6 through 12, by saying we're looking at all these chapters kind of in one short bullet point. We've got the command, right? That's the whole point. We got the command that is now being expounded into all these chapters, that's saying essentially, hey, God, Yahweh, He's the only one. Don't worship any others. Don't be focused on them. Don't be focused on yourself. Don't be looking at other people and saying, well, how do they worship their gods? Copy, paste, we'll worship our God the same way. No. So love Yahweh, serve Him. That's what God's calling them to do in this first commandment. Again, the second word of the 10 words, but the first one that's a command. So the first commandment. One final point, since we, as we read through this, you can see there's this golden calf instance that is reiterated, Deuteronomy chapter 9. Of course, this was way back in Exodus, but Moses brings this up, and when he talks about it, he talks about the tablets. Now, we've talked about the 10 words, the 10 commandments, and when I talked about that last time, there were some things that were different maybe than what you'd heard before. Here's another thing that's pretty interesting and significant and actually gives us a little insight into God. And that is that these, when you think of these, when you hear 10 Commandments, what you probably think of is, one, another one, and the first one has the first 4 or 5 commands, and then the next one has the rest of the commands. But that's actually not what it would have been like. In fact, so with these kind of treaties, the normal way that this would have happened is that you would have 2 copies. So one tablet had all 10 words on it, and the other tablet had all 10 words on it. And why that is because, so let's say you have a Hittite king, there's a neighboring village, he says, hey, I'm going to make this covenant treaty with you. And so he is the initiator, he's got his copy, and then they, as the people on the other end of this deal, they have their copy. And so each side has their copy. So God is giving 2 copies. One for him and one for Israel. But both copies are in the middle of the camp. They're in the tabernacle. And that shows that God is with his people. We know this from so many different ways, but this is one way that God shows being with his people. That he doesn't have his copy off somewhere else. His copy is with his people as well, because he is with his people as well. Those 2 copies are always together. He and his people are always together. And of course, this happens in a much grander way when Jesus comes to earth in human form. And so this shows us about God being with his people. So it's really cool to see that when we see that these are actually 2 full copies, not 2 pages of 1 copy. So there's more to say about this. There's more to talk about with making images specifically of Jesus. That's an application for us today. The different denominations, churches, individuals have different ideas about, well, can I have an image of Jesus? What are the rules on that? How does that apply with this? A lot of different views on that. I'm just going to make a supplemental video that will kind of dive into that and my thoughts on that. Probably be a bit shorter than this one, but that'll be up soon after this video. And lastly, maybe you're wondering why I have this Lego Star Wars A-Wing. Probably caught your attention. Much more so than anything else on the screen, right? More than these books behind me, more than the whiteboard here with the outline and the theme of covenant renewal and the structure of the Bible, more than this, white wall over here. This caught your attention, didn't it? And perhaps kept your attention this whole time. You're wondering, why is he holding this? God wants us to have our attention captured and focused on him. Everything else is secondary. Our focus needs to be on him. That's the point of this command. It's all about him. It's about focusing on him and nothing else. We're not worshiping other gods. We're not focused on ourselves. We're focused on Yahweh. So, again, look for that next video. That should be out soon as well. And after that, then we get to finally move on to the next command, which is maybe one of the more misunderstood commands, the one on taking God's name in vain. Thank you for watching that video. I hope that it helped you learn a little bit more about the Bible today. And if you'd like to continue to learn more about the Bible, then we have plenty of other videos on the channel. And if this has been helpful for you, then you can always let me know by subscribing to the channel. And hopefully I'll be able to continue to help you learn even more about God's Word. Thanks.